has been a sort of a topical thing recently, working with some of our clients, and we do get questions about this, about the differences with working with the public sector, government contracts versus the sort of private sector. Now, you've done a lot of work with the public sector, so maybe we could just shed a bit of light on that to start with. Let's start there.
I think the first and the most fundamental difference is that when you are dealing with a public sector bid, it is not the decision maker's money per se, it's the government's money. And that creates a different perspective. It doesn't mean that they have money to burn or waste, but it does mean that they take a different perspective on it, because they're not necessarily accountable to shareholders. They're not necessarily, they don't have the same criteria for measuring ROI. So bear that in mind. What it also means, of course, is that they are therefore more focused upon, this might be harsh, but my impression is that they're more focused upon making a selection that doesn't do damage to their own reputation or career. In other words, they play it a lot safer. They're not the kind of people that will take a punt. They're not the kind of people that will pioneer or be at the vanguard of new technology or new ideas or pilot schemes. They prefer tried and tested. Thirdly, there is a very strong sense in public sector bids of order and protocol. And for example, we were discussing earlier something we're working on right now, where there is a question clarification session coming up next week, where I think even the government body involved said we don't want any salespeople on that call. What does that mean? It means that actually what we're there for is precisely what the agenda says. We don't want to be pitched to, we don't want to be sold to. We want to get some clarification upon the written proposal that you submitted recently, be it 50 pages or 500 pages or whatever it is. So we need a bit more detail about some of the propositions or some of the ideas or the jargon or the language, or we need some gaps filling in, but we basically need a fuller picture. And then once we've got a full enough picture from that, we will then make a decision about who we're going to invite in to pitch us face-to-face or virtually in more detail on a more perhaps salesy basis. And the temptation is for many firms is to try and squeeze in to those sessions a few more bits, a bit of a pitch, a bit of something you didn't know, a bit of, oh, I used to work for you, or whatever it may be. And it can backfire. So I think my third observation is this: is that obey.
And I suppose from the sitting in their shoes, they've got a process to follow, they've got a protocol to follow, they are complying with certain regulations around the process they're following, and they need to show, if they were audited, that they followed that process, which is why they're so particular.
There's a strong sense of agenda and protocol, and don't try and interfere with it, and don't try and influence it. Don't try and ask questions of people. Don't get cute. Don't try and make sideways connections with people to get a bit of an inside edge. The critical thing at this stage is that it's still very rational. It's still very objective. It's still being scored or quantified in some way. Play by the rules. Because if my early impression of you is you like to bend the rules a bit, well, by definition, I'm going to extend that into a 5-year contract with you when you might also bend the rules a bit, and that scares me.